$80,000 of German-engineered luxury steel is currently sitting in a gravel lot on the industrial outskirts of Fairfax County, Virginia, collecting a layer of fine gray dust. It's a Cadillac Escalade, bright red, custom chrome rims, and a leather interior that probably smells like success and unearned confidence. My neighbor, Brad, thinks that car is his status symbol. He thinks it's proof that he's winning at life, while I'm just some legacy resident at number 856 who spends too much time edging his lawn. But as I stand here in my garage, looking at the empty patch of concrete where that Escalade spent the last 6 months, I don't see a luxury vehicle. I see a ticking financial time bomb. You see, Brad is currently 10,000 miles away, sipping expensive wine on the Amalfi Coast. He left his asset parked 6 feet deep into my driveway, obstructing my access to my own workshop. He dared me to do something about it. He laughed and told me the red tape would protect him. He's about to find out that for a man who spent 35 years managing international shipping lanes and port logistics, red tape isn't a barrier, it's a weapon. By the time Brad's flight touches down at Dulles International, he won't just be dealing with jet lag. He'll be staring down a storage bill that could fund a small college education. And the best part? It's all 100% legal. Stay with me, because I'm going to show you exactly how I turned an $80,000 ego trip into a 3-week nightmare of demurrage and storage fees. This is how you win a suburban war, not with shouting, but with a surveyor's map and a very long memory. I'm 68 years old. I've lived at 856 for nearly half my life. My wife, Martha, and I raised 2 kids here. We mowed the grass, shoveled the snow, and paid our property taxes every year like clockwork. After she passed away 4 years ago, this house became more than just a building. It's my record. It's the proof that I existed and worked hard. Then Brad bought 858. He tore down a perfectly good 1950s ranch house and built a glass and steel cube that looks like it belongs in a sci-fi movie. Brad runs a biosync supplement startup. He's 34, has a jawline like a comic book character, and treats every conversation like he's trying to sell you a subscription to his life. The trouble started with his fleet. Brad has 4 cars, but his garage is full of inventory, hundreds of boxes of protein powder and Peloton gear. So he parks on the street, or rather, he parks on my driveway apron. Strike 1, the neighborly request. It was a Tuesday morning in October. I had my 1998 Ford F-150 loaded with scrap metal I was taking to the yard. The red Escalade was angled so sharply across the mouth of my drive that I couldn't swing the truck out without clipping his rear quarter panel. I walked over to 858. The house vibrated with some kind of bass-heavy techno music. I knocked on the glass door. Brad answered wearing a headset and a weighted vest. He didn't even take the headset off. "Hey, Brad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your caddy is blocking the exit. I've got a load of steel in the back, and I can't clear the turn. Could you scoot it back about 10 feet? Brad checked his watch. "Dave, buddy, I'm in the middle of a focus block. It's a shared space vibe, man. Just cut the wheel harder. You've been driving that rig since the Stone Age. You should be able to thread a needle by now." "It's not shared, Brad. It's my driveway. I pay the taxes on this concrete." "Lines are just legacy thinking, Dave. Optimize your route. I'll move it when my energy levels peak at noon." He shut the door. I sat in my truck for 2 hours, watching my blood pressure rise on my own watch. Strike 2. The formal notice. I'm a logistics man. I know that if a warning isn't documented, it never happened. 2 weeks later, Brad's Escalade was parked so deep onto my lot that he was practically touching my recycling bins. I went into my home office, sat at my desk, and typed out a formal letter. I didn't use a computer. I used my old IBM Selectric. I wanted him to feel the weight of the ink on the page. I cited the Fairfax County Residential Code regarding obstructing private ingress. I stated clearly that the driveway was private property and any further encroachment would be treated as trespass. I walked it over and handed it to him while he was getting his mail. "What's this, a Christmas card?" Brad joked. "Read it, Brad. It's a boundary." He scanned it, his eyes darting back and forth. For a second, I saw a flash of real annoyance in his eyes. Not the cool CEO vibe, but the look of a spoiled kid being told no. He crumpled the paper in his hand. "Dave, you're retired. You're bored. I get it. But this is aggressive. We're in a new economy. We share resources. Don't be the guy who ruins the neighborhood vibe because he's obsessed with a few inches of dirt." He dropped the crumpled ball of paper on the sidewalk, my sidewalk, and walked away. Strike 3, the digital paper trail. By November, the vibe was dead. I was feeling old. I was feeling like a dinosaur in my own yard. Brad started hosting mastermind brunches on weekends, and the Escalade became a permanent guard dog at the end of my drive. I took out my phone and took 6 photos from different angles. I made sure to capture the license plate, the VIN number on the dash, and the way the front tires were clearly over the expansion joint that marked my property line. I sent him an email. I CC'd my daughter, who's an attorney in Richmond. Subject: Final warning. Unauthorized trespass at 8:56. Brad, this is the 3rd and final request. You are intentionally obstructing a private entrance. Per the documents attached, the city authorizes property owners to remove trespassing vehicles after 3 documented notifications. This is your 3rd. Brad's response came at midnight. "Good luck finding a tow company in this county with the balls to touch a bonded business asset like this. The police won't help you, Dave. They have real crimes to solve. Go back to sleep." That "go back to sleep" comment, that was the mistake. He thought I was tired. He didn't realize that a logistics manager is at his best when he's dealing with a difficult delivery. The next morning, my joints were aching. The Virginia dampness was settling in, and my hip was giving me grief. I sat at my kitchen table and felt a wave of doubt. Is he right? I wondered. Am I just a bitter old man holding on to a piece of concrete? But then I looked at a photo of Martha sitting on the porch of this house 20 years ago. She loved this place. She worked 2 jobs to help me make those payments. Giving up those 6 feet felt like giving up a piece of her. I didn't call a tow truck. Not yet. I knew how the system worked. If I towed him and didn't have my ducks in a row, Brad would sue me for wrongful conversion. He'd claim he had an implied easement. He'd make my life a living hell in court. I spent the next 4 days in the basement of the county courthouse. If you've never been to the archives department in Fairfax, imagine a library where all the books are made of lead and the librarians haven't seen the sun since 1994. I need the original 1958 subdivision plat for the Oakwood tract, I told the clerk. Her name tag said Evelyn. She looked like she'd heard it all before. "Those are on microfiche, sir. The machine is broken." "I can wait," I said. "I've got 20 years of retirement to burn." I sat in a hard plastic chair for 6 hours. Evelyn finally brought me a dusty binder. I spent 3 hours squinting at grainy lines. I found my lot, but there was a problem. The 1958 map showed a shared maintenance strip between 856 and 858. My heart sunk. If it was shared, I couldn't tow him. Brad would win. I went back the next day, And the day after that, I was obsessed. I started looking through the easement vacation records from the 1980s. I was looking for a needle in a haystack. On the fourth day, I found it. In 1984, the previous owner of my house, a man named Mr. Henderson, had petitioned the county to dissolve the shared strip because the neighbor at the time had built a retaining wall. The county had granted the vacation of easement. I had the original signed, stamped deed modification. My property wasn't shared, it was private, all the way to the iron pin. But where was the pin? I hired Rick. Rick is a 72-year-old surveyor who smells like pine needles and menthol cough drops. He showed up with a metal detector and a heavy iron bar. "Brad's gonna see you," I said, looking at 858. "Let him see," Rick grunted. "I'm a state-licensed official. If he touches me, he goes to jail." We spent 4 hours in the rain. Brad came out twice, staring at us through his designer sunglasses, looking confused but still maintaining that smug, "I'm too busy to care" posture. Rick's metal detector started screaming near a boxwood bush. He started digging. He was 2 feet down when he hit something solid. He cleared away the mud with a brush. It was the iron pin, the original 1958 survey marker. "Dave," Rick said, standing up and wiping his muddy hands on his overalls, "look at this." He ran a laser line from the pin to the street. The red beam sliced right through the middle of the Escalade's front tire. "He's not just blocking you, Dave. He's 6 inches over the pin with his entire front axle. On this side of the line, Dave, you're the king. On that side, he is. And right now, he's trespassing in your kingdom." I paid Rick for the certified, notarized survey, $1,500. It was more than my monthly pension check. My hands were shaking when I wrote the check, wondering if I was making a massive financial mistake. But then I looked at the red Escalade, sitting there like it owned the world. 3 weeks, I muttered to myself, remembering the conversation I'd overheard Brad having with his wife Ashley about their trip to Italy. He's leaving for Friday for 21 days. I walked back into my house and picked up the phone. I didn't call a regular tow company. I called a heavy-duty recovery specialist that handled high-value assets for banks. The trap was set. The logistics were finalized. Now I just had to wait for the flight to take off. Friday afternoon arrived with a heavy gray sky and the kind of humid Virginia air that makes your bones feel 10 years older than they already are. I stood in my darkened garage, peering through the small, salt-rimmed window that looks out onto the shared space between 856 and 858. The red Escalade was there, a squatting beast of chrome and entitlement. At 4:30 p.m., a black Uber pulled into Brad's driveway. I watched, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs that I hadn't felt since my days managing the night shift at the Norfolk docks. Brad and his wife Ashley came out of the house. They looked like they were stepping off a movie set, linen clothes, designer luggage, and that effortless air of people who believe the world is their personal concierge. Brad didn't even check the car. He didn't look at the pink survey ribbons Rick had tied to the boxwood bushes. He just tossed a bag into the Uber, kissed Ashley, and laughed at something on his phone. Then he looked over at my house. For a split second, our eyes met through the garage window. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I just stood there like a ghost. Brad just smirked, gave a mocking 2-fingered salute toward my front door, and climbed into the Uber. As the car pulled away, the silence that settled over the neighborhood was deafening. I sat down on my workbench, my hands shaking. "Dave, what are you doing?" A voice whispered in the back of my mind. It was the same voice that had kept me safe for 35 years in logistics, the voice that feared the worst-case scenario. If I was wrong about that 1984 easement vacation, if the county records were flawed, Brad would sue me for every penny of my pension. He'd call it theft of a business asset. He'd have high-priced lawyers in slim-fit suits dissecting my life in a courtroom. I looked at the framed photo of Martha on my workbench. She was a woman of peace. She'd always told me, "Dave, don't let your temper build a cage you can't get out of." I closed my eyes. I thought about the 3 warnings. I thought about the go-back-to-sleep email. I thought about the way he'd crumbled my letter and dropped it on my sidewalk. This wasn't a temper tantrum. This was a bill that had been ignored for 6 months. And in my world, when a bill goes unpaid, the cargo gets seized. I picked up the phone. I didn't call Joey's Towing or some guy with a hook on the back of a rusted Chevy. I called North Bonded Asset Recovery. These are the guys the banks call when a $500,000 piece of construction equipment disappears or when a yacht needs to be repossessed from a private dock. "This is Dave Miller at 856 Highland Drive," I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. "I have a trespasser in fact on a deeded private lot. I have the certified survey, the notarized removal order, and a police incident number for the trespass warning." "We're on our way, Mr. Miller," the dispatcher said. "ETA is 40 minutes. At 9 p.m., under the cover of a light drizzle, a massive, gleaming white flatbed truck backed into the street. It didn't have the loud, grinding gears of a city tow truck. It hissed with air brakes and hydraulic precision. 2 men in tactical work gear hopped out. "The red one?" the lead driver asked, checking his tablet. "That's it," I said, stepping out onto my porch. "Check the iron pin. The front axle is 6 inches over the line and the rear is obstructing the primary ingress to my workshop." The driver, a man who looked like he'd seen it all, walked the line with a high-lumen flashlight. He looked at Rick's survey stake. He looked at the Escalade's tires. "You're dead on, sir. He's squatting on your dirt." What happened next was a masterpiece of logistics. Because the Escalade was an all-wheel drive luxury vehicle with an electronic parking brake, you can't just drag it. If you do, you destroy the transmission and the transfer case, a $20,000 mistake. The recovery team used go-jacks, hydraulic dollies that slipped under each individual tire. They jacked the $80,000 SUV off the ground until it was hovering an inch above my concrete. Then, using a winch that sounded like a low hum, they slid the beast onto the tilted bed of the truck. As they buckled the heavy-duty nylon straps over the custom chrome rims, I felt a strange mix of relief and terror. "Where is it going?" I asked. "To our bonded facility in Lorton. It's a climate-controlled, high-security lot, 24-hour surveillance. No one gets in without a court order or a full payout of the storage lien." I signed the manifest. The truck pulled away, and for the first time in 6 months, my driveway was a clean, uninterrupted stretch of concrete. I walked out and stood exactly where the car had been. I felt the texture of the expansion joint under my boots. It was 9:45 p.m. Brad was likely somewhere over the Atlantic, watching an in-flight movie and drinking a gin and tonic, completely unaware that his asset had just entered the world of high-stakes storage fees. In the shipping business, we have a saying, "The cargo is the hostage." On Monday morning, I didn't just sit back and wait. I went back to my office and pulled out the logistics playbook. I knew Brad's Escalade was a business lease. I'd seen the BioSync Corp registration on the insurance card he'd left on his dash once. This was my first twist. I called the risk management department of the bank that held the lien on the vehicle. "I am the property owner at 856 Highland," I told the bank's representative. "I am calling to inform you that vehicle VIN ending in 4922 has been impounded for illegal trespass and obstruction. As the lien holder, you are formally notified that the asset is now subject to a possessory storage lien under Virginia Code Section 46.2. When a bank hears possessory lien, they panic. It means the tow company now has a higher priority claim to the car than the bank does. If the fees aren't paid, the tow company can eventually sell the car at auction to cover the debt, and the bank loses their collateral. Within 2 hours, the bank had placed a regulatory hold on Brad's account. Then I called my own insurance agent. I told them I was concerned about the structural integrity of my driveway apron due to the prolonged static load of an 8,000-pound vehicle parked on a non-reinforced residential slab. My insurance company, eager to avoid a future claim, sent a notice of potential subrogation to Brad's insurance carrier. Now, let's look at the math. The real, cold American numbers that Brad was about to face. Specialized recovery fee, $450, because it required dollies and a high-security flatbed. Administrative filing fee, $175. Daily storage, high-value asset rate, $125 per day. Lien holder notification fee, $150. Luxury surcharge, $35 per day for climate-controlled, secured indoor storage. Brad was going to be in Italy for 21 days. $125 plus $35 equaled $160 per day. 160 times 21 days equaled $3,360, plus the recovery and admin fees. He was looking at $4,135 just to get the garage door to open. And that wasn't the worst part. Because I had notified the bank and his insurance company, his BioSync corporate credit rating was taking a hit every day the vehicle remained in seized status. For the next 2 weeks, I mowed my lawn. I trimmed my hedges. I sat on my porch in the evenings and looked at my empty driveway. The neighbors would walk by, people like Mrs. Gable from 852, and they'd stop. "Where's Brad's big red truck, Dave?" she asked one afternoon. "I moved it, Mrs. Gable," I said, giving her a polite nod. "I moved it to a much more secure location." I wasn't lying. It was the most secure location $4,000 could buy. But as the days ticked closer to his return, the old doubt would creep back in. I'd see the sun setting over the glass walls of 858, and I'd think about the look on Brad's face when he realized his salute cost him a $4,000 parking ticket. I knew he wouldn't come home and apologize. Men like Brad don't apologize. They attack. I spent the final Friday afternoon power washing the oil stains out of my driveway. I wanted the concrete to be white. I wanted it to be a blank canvas for the final act. Brad's flight was scheduled to land at 3:15 p.m. on Saturday. I checked the flight tracker. Flight AZ610 from Rome. Status on time. I coiled the power washer hose, went inside, and put on my reading glasses. I had one more document to prepare, the final invoice for the survey I'd paid for. I wasn't just getting my land back. I was going to make sure he understood the cost of every single inch. Saturday afternoon in Virginia has a specific sound. It's the distant hum of lawn mowers, the smell of cut grass, and the long golden shadows of the oak trees stretching across Highland Drive. I was out in my front yard, but I wasn't gardening. I was standing near my mailbox at 8:56, checking the alignment of my driveway markers. Everything was perfect. The concrete was white, The lines were clear, and most importantly, the space was empty. At 4:45 p.m., a black town car turned the corner and slowed down in front of 858. My chest tightened. That old logistics anxiety flared up. The feeling you get when a massive shipment is arriving and you're not 100% sure the crane is going to hold. The driver hopped out and began unloading a mountain of designer luggage. Brad and Ashley stepped out of the back seat. They looked exactly like people who had spent 3 weeks spending money they hadn't earned yet. Brad was wearing a white linen shirt, expensive loafers with no socks, and a tan that screamed, "I'm more successful than you." They were laughing. Ashley was showing the driver something on her phone. Then Brad turned toward his house. He stopped mid-laugh. His head did a slow, mechanical swivel. He looked at his empty driveway. Then he looked at the street. Then he looked at my driveway. He actually rubbed his eyes like he was expecting the red Escalade to materialize out of thin air. "Hey!" Brad shouted, his voice cracking with a mix of jet lag and sudden panic. "Ashley, where's the car?" Ashley stopped talking to the driver. Her face went pale. "Did you park it in the garage before we left?" "No, it was right here." Brad lunged toward his own driveway, spinning in circles. He looked like a man who had lost his phone, except his phone was an $80,000 SUV. I didn't move. I waited for him to see me. It didn't take long. He looked over the boxwood bushes and saw me standing on my porch, leaning against the railing with my hands in my pockets. No coffee, no smile, just me. Brad didn't walk to my property line. He ran. He didn't even care about the luggage on the sidewalk. Dave, where's my car? Did you see it get stolen? When did it happen?" "It didn't get stolen, Brad," I said, my voice carrying across the quiet street like a tolling bell. "Welcome home. I hope the Amalfi Coast was worth the trip." "What are you talking about? Where's the Escalade?" "It was removed, Brad, Saturday morning, 21 days ago, exactly 12 hours after your Uber left for Dulles." Brad's face went through 4 different colors in 5 seconds. He reached the edge of my grass, the line Rick had marked, and he stopped. He looked like he wanted to charge me, but he saw the look in my eyes. I wasn't the nice old man anymore. I was the guy who used to tell 300-pound dock workers that their cargo was staying on the ship until the paperwork was right. "You towed it?" Brad screamed. His face was a dark, angry purple now. "You towed a bonded business asset? Do you have any idea what you've done? That's theft. I'm calling the police right now." "Go ahead," I said, reaching into the pocket of my work shirt and pulling out a small laminated card. I told them to send Officer Henderson. He's the one who signed the trespass incident report. Or tell them to bring the county clerk. They've got the notarized survey showing your front axle was sitting 6 inches onto my deeded property. Brad pulled out his phone, his thumbs flying across the screen. "You think a survey matters? I'll have my lawyers sue you for intentional tort. I'll take your house, Dave. I'll take your pension." "Brad, stop," I said, and for the first time I raised my voice just enough to command the space. "Before you call your lawyers, you should probably check your voicemail and your email." He paused, his chest heaving. "What are you talking about?" "I notified your lien holder, Brad, the bank. I told them their collateral was sitting in a high-security impound lot for illegal trespass. I also called my insurance agent about the potential cracks in my driveway slab from your vehicle's weight. They sent a subrogation notice to your carrier 2 weeks ago." Brad's hands started to shake. I could see the gears turning. He wasn't just a neighbor anymore. He was a CEO seeing a balance sheet go into the red. "How much?" he hissed. "Well," I said, leaning in, "let's do the math. You've been gone for 21 days. The recovery fee was $450. The admin filing was $175. The secured indoor storage, because I didn't want your asset getting rained on, is $125 a day, plus the luxury surcharge of $35. And since today is Saturday, there's a $150 after-hours release fee if you want it before Monday. I watched him do the mental arithmetic. I saw the moment he hit the $4,000 mark. That's $4,385, Brad, and the tow company's yard in Lorton closes in exactly 55 minutes. If you're not there with a certified check or a corporate card that hasn't been flagged by your bank yet, the fee rolls over at midnight. That'll be another $160. You psychopath, he whispered. He looked at Ashley, who was now crying on their front steps. No, Brad, I said. I'm a logistics manager. I told you 3 times to move it. I told you in person, I told you in writing, and I told you via email. You told me to go back to sleep. Well, I woke up, and when I wake up, I bill for my time. The next 40 minutes were the most satisfying of my life. I didn't go inside. I stood on my porch and watched the grind set crumble. Brad had to call another Uber because he didn't have a car. He had to wait 10 minutes on the curb surrounded by his Italian leather suitcases while the neighbors started to come out of their houses to see what the shouting was about. Mr. Miller from 850 walked by with his dog. He looked at Brad, then looked at me and gave me a silent thumbs up. Brad got into the Uber, slamming the door so hard I thought the glass would shatter. He came back 3 hours later. The sun was down and the street lights were humming. I heard the low, expensive rumble of the Escalade's engine before I saw it. It crawled up the street, looking dull and dusty. Brad didn't park it on the driveway apron. He didn't even park it on the street. He drove it straight into his 2-car garage, pulling it so far forward that he had to crunch over the boxes of his own BioSync supplements just to get the garage door to close. Thud. The garage door hit the floor. The war was over. The aftermath was quiet. There were no more mastermind brunches at 8:58. The techno music stopped. Ashley stopped wearing her designer workout gear and started staying inside with the blinds drawn. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. It wasn't from a lawyer. It was from the bank. Because of the impound event and the insurance subrogation, they had conducted a risk review of Brad's business lease. Apparently, having your primary corporate vehicle seized for trespassing isn't good for your credit rating. They were asking for an additional security deposit on the vehicle, another $5,000, or they were going to terminate the lease. Brad sold the house 3 months later. He didn't even put a for sale sign in the yard. A moving truck showed up on a Tuesday morning while I was at the hardware store. By the time I got home, they were gone. The new owners moved in last month. They're a retired couple from Michigan. The first thing the husband did was come over to my yard. He wasn't wearing a weighted vest. He was wearing an old Detroit Tigers cap and holding a box of donuts. "Hey there," he said, pointing to the driveway. "I saw the survey markers Rick left. Just wanted to make sure I'm keeping my Buick on the right side of the line. I'm a rules guy, you know." I shook his hand. "I appreciate that. I'm a rules guy myself." I still have Rick's survey map framed in my workshop. Sometimes when I'm working on a project and I feel that old frustration about the world changing too fast, I look at that red line. It reminds me that in the American suburbs, the loudest guy in the room isn't the one who wins. It's the guy who knows where the iron pins are buried. It's the guy who respects the boundary. So I'm asking you, the people who still believe that a man's word and his property deed mean something, was I too cold? Was $4,000 and a ruined vacation too high a price for a parking spot? Or is there something uniquely American about letting a man pay the full price for his own arrogance? Let me know in the comments. I read every one of them. And remember, before you park your ego on someone else's concrete, make sure you know who's holding the invoice.